Today I'm going to expose the half-truths and the lies behind Kelley Packer's Idaho Healthcare Exchange. Now, before I jump into the topic, I want to share a little background information with you. For months now, I have challenged Kelley Packer to constitutionally defend her actions with regard to Obamacare, Common Core, and abortion. She has offered up a few personal rationalizations, but she has never once attempted to constitutionally justify what she did. I am her constituent. She is my representative. I have an obligation to question her. She has a duty to respond. She has failed in that duty. And I have been at a loss to understand why she wouldn't feel an obligation to do what is right, to do the correct thing, to defend herself, and to be accountable to me. 2 days ago, I got my answer. One Craig Parrish, an attorney in Pocatello, an active member of the Bannock County Republican Party, and a strong supporter of Kelley Packer, he and I and one other gentleman were engaged in a Facebook discussion regarding the constitutionality of Obamacare. He replied to me and presented his opinion on constitutional issues. He said, and I quote, "Focus on why those policies are good or bad, not whether they are constitutional," unquote. Not whether they are constitutional? Are we just to kick the Constitution to the side and forget about it? Use our better judgment? My friends, I submit to you that we should not. We must not. Now, what is very discouraging to me is over the last few weeks, I have heard from two other Kelley Packer supporters. These are strong, very vocal supporters of Ms. Packer. And both of these gentlemen have talked about the idea that the Constitution is disposable if the cause is just. That is ludicrous. That is bizarre. I cannot begin to comprehend that kind of irrational stupidity. So this answered my question. Why would Kelley Packer not feel the responsibility to constitutionally support her actions? The answer is simply this. Those who support her, those who stand behind her, don't put a lot of emphasis on the Constitution. She is comfortable with their support, and therefore she appears to be comfortable with the idea that the Constitution really doesn't matter. Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, "On every question of construction, carry ourselves back to the time when the Constitution was adopted. Recollect the spirit manifested in the debates, and instead of trying what meaning we may squeeze out of the text or invent it against it, conform to the probable one in which it was passed." Unquote. This is what we must do with the Constitution. We can't twist it, and we can't bend it, and we can't violate it for our own personal needs. But apparently some don't have a problem with that. The reason I'm upset is on May 2nd, 2014, Michael O'Donnell wrote a column about Kelley Packer and quoted her from a speech she gave at the Pocatello Rotary Club. And I would like to share some of the things that she said. And I will prove these to be blatant lies or half-truths. And I will show you how you can verify my words and know that I am speaking truth. Now, according to this article, Packer made it clear that she was not a fan of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. But the state representative, Kelley Packer, said that establishing the state-run exchange was a smart move. Well, my friends, the state-run exchange is nothing but a state franchise of federal overreach. So I'm going to go through this bill, and I will show you proof that cannot be denied. First of all, before we get into that, I want to make one point very clear. The exchange was originally going to cost $20 million. Now, that $20 million came from the federal government. Well, we're now approaching $100 million, and the federal government is going to continue to fund us until 2016. It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money. Now, Packer has said again and again and again, aren't we lucky? The exchange didn't cost us any money because it's all federal money. Well, who funds the federal government if it's not taxpayers in Idaho and the other states? And even more damaging than that is 40% of every dollar that we receive from the federal government was borrowed. Borrowed money that will enslave our children and our grandchildren. We have created this franchise, and all we have managed to accomplish is we have increased federal debt that enslaves us. Absolutely unbelievable. Now let's get into the bill itself. And I quote, "The state of Idaho asserts its sovereignty by refusing to surrender decision-making authority over health care issues." My friends, the state of Idaho has asserted no sovereignty. The state of Idaho is going down a federally mandated path. The path is controlled by the federal government. The path was created by the federal government. And Idaho simply said, okay, we know that Obamacare is unconstitutional. We know that it's bad for the people. We know that it shouldn't be allowed. And we lack the spine to do anything about it. So they created the Healthcare Exchange. Here's something else that's troubling in the exchange, and I quote, "The exchange created by this chapter is not a state agency." It is not a state agency. What does that mean? It means that there's no oversight from our legislators. It means that we, the people, have no rights to object, to oppose, to change policy. The only requirement in the federal exchange, let me find this, I'll read it to you. Here it is. "The exchange shall submit a written report of its activities and the condition of the exchange to the director, the governor, and the director of the Legislative Services Office for distribution to all legislators on or before January 31st. But that's it. So they submit it to these people. The governor has the right to appoint board members, but that's it. The legislature, no powers at all. And the voice of the people, nothing. The exchange is completely autonomous. It can do what it wants, when it wants, whatever way it wants. And we can't say a thing about it. Here's another interesting part of the bill, and I quote, "Whenever a member of the board has a conflict of interest on a matter that is before the board, the member shall fully disclose it to the board." Well, isn't that interesting? Miss Kelley Packer is a member of this board. Miss Kelley Packer has received special interest money from Blue Cross. Miss Kelley Packer is making decisions about our health care, and is anyone so naive as to believe that Blue Cross gives her money and expects nothing in return? Please. Now here's another part that I find very troubling. It says, "Neither members of the board nor any other person working or performing services for the exchange shall be considered public officials, employees, or agents of the state." Again, completely autonomous. They are outside the control of the legislature. They are outside the control of the people. Now that should make people very, very uncomfortable. Now, since there is no oversight, and you read through it, they have the right to change their bylaws anytime they want. Now, back to Kelley Packer. she stated that one of the advantages of the state-run exchange included lower fees. Interesting. Let's see what the bill has to say. You see, right now, the federal exchange has a 3% fee, and the state exchange has a 1.5% fee. But that is only half of the story. The other half of the story is the part that Kelley Packer doesn't want you to know. You need to know. Here is what the actual law says. It says that the exchange has powers and authority to assess and collect fees from participating health carriers, exchange users, and receive funds from any other source that shall be used solely for the purposes of this chapter. So, yes, they are charging us only 1.5% of our premiums as a fee. But they charge the health insurance companies whatever fees they like. And as nearly as I can discover, they have not disclosed what they're charging the insurance companies. Now, are the insurance companies simply going to absorb that cost? Or are they going to adjust their premiums so that they can recover those costs of doing business through the exchange? Any idiot knows that the business is going to take action to adjust their premiums so that those costs don't come out of their pockets but come out of your pockets. Now, finally, remember that we are approaching $100 million of federal grant money. Now, that came out of Idahoans' pockets, too. And it will come out of our children's pockets and our children's children's pockets, because our federal government is $17 trillion in debt, and the exchange increased that debt unnecessarily. That $100 million, which is actually going to grow probably to several $100 million, we didn't have to spend that money. We didn't have to become part of the problem, part of the reason for this massive federal debt. But out of irresponsibility, out of stupidity, we did. Now, here's an interesting one, and I quote, "The exchange shall be financially self-supporting and shall not request any financial support from the state and shall not have power to tax or encumber state assets." This exchange is in its infancy. It has just barely been formed, and already it is in violation of its own laws. You see, the exchange has already borrowed $400,000 from the Department of Health. Isn't that interesting? So their own law says they can't do it, but already they are doing it. Because they're a private entity, we have very limited access to them. We have very limited control over what they do. They're already a rogue agency. They've already demonstrated that they have no interest in the law that governs them. Now, here's another one that I think you'll like. Quote, "Before the exchange begins taking applications or collecting information from exchange users, the board shall certify to the director and governor that personal information collected from and about any person who voluntarily uses the exchange, including but not limited to health care records and income, is and will continue to be secure." There's another one that they violated. It's a lie, my friends. It is a lie. You see, the software that our state exchange uses is actually software owned by the federal government. And so when you provide your information to the state, it is immediately saved on a federal database. And now your privacy is being secured by those people that we know we can trust, like the NSA and the IRS. Come on, folks. You need to know the truth to protect yourself. So let's go back to the journal article. This one is the biggest lie of all. It is blatant. It is horrible. The journal article says, "Health plans approved by the state exchange cannot include coverage for abortion." Wrong, false, lie. You see, when it became apparent that the Healthcare Exchange was going to become law in Idaho, a group called Idaho Chooses Life brought an amendment to the exchange. And this amendment was very simple. It's just a couple of sentences, which I'm going to read to you. It said, quote, "The exchange shall respect the religious and conscience liberties of Idaho citizens, employers, churches, and religious organizations. No health benefit plan offered through the exchange shall require the purchase or provision of benefits which include sterilization, contraceptives, abortificants, or drugs or devices which act as abortificants, emergency contraception, or surgical abortions." Now it says abortificants. What is an abortificant? There's a new type of abortion that, well, I don't know that it's really new, but it's being used more and more all of the time. And because of the way it's being used, we don't know how many children have been butchered through this. But it's called medical abortions. And a medical abortion is simply a pill or a group of pills that a woman can swallow, and it will cause her body to expel the child. Now, the reason we can't track these very well is in some places you can order these pills online. And so women order those pills for themselves, but they also order them for their sisters and their girlfriends, and, well, you get the picture. So this bill, all it did was gave the insurance purchaser the choice. They could either include coverage or they could exclude coverage. You know, it gave them choice, like freedom, like liberty. Kelley Packer killed this amendment. And now people are being forced against their will and against their religious freedoms and beliefs to provide coverage for abortions. Now, Kelley is half right, which makes what she said only a half lie. You see, the exchange does prohibit surgical abortions. That's the traditional procedural type. But it protects medical abortions. Now, I don't know. If you could interview a murdered child, would he or she say that, it really wasn't so bad because it was a medical abortion, not a surgical abortion. I don't feel quite so dead as I would have if they'd aborted me with a vacuum as opposed to aborting me with chemicals. My friends, this is an abomination. This is a lie. I have just given you the truth. You don't believe me? Call Idaho Chooses Life in Boise, Idaho. Talk to the director, David Ripley. He will lay it out for you. Now, this is very interesting to me, and this is what the article says, quote, "As she tackles legislation, Packer said she always tries to determine the intent of any bills and then determines who supports or opposes it and why." Now, listen to this carefully. Then she uses her personal experiences and values to help form a decision that best serves her constituents. What did the Founding Fathers have to say about that, I wonder? Daniel Webster said, "It is hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be kind masters, but they mean to be masters." This is Kelley Packer, my friends. She uses her best judgment and her intuition and makes her decisions and never looks to the Constitution. And that is why she cannot answer my constitutional questions. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "In questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in men, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution." Unquote. These are the founders of our nation. These are the men who were there when these great documents were forged. These are the men who know what they mean, and they have made it clear in their writings. These are the men that Kelley Packer ignores. Now here's something else that's interesting in Kelley Packer's article from the Journal. And it says, Kelley Packer said she was disappointed that the legislature did nothing this past season to boost funding for roads and bridges in the state or to address the lack of sales tax collections for internet sales. Now, my friends, we live in a state that is in trouble. Over 60% of our lands are controlled by the federal government, so we cannot access the timber, we cannot access the oil, we cannot access the natural gas, we cannot access the minerals that lie beneath our feet. And because of that, our fiscal situation is difficult at best. The people in Idaho are some of the lowest paid in the nation. The people in Idaho are taxed. The people of Idaho are suffering from high unemployment. The people of Idaho are hurting, and they're hurting desperately. And Kelley Packer says what we need to do is tax them more. The Journal article goes on to say that the District 28 representative said that she was honored to carry a bill on child advocacy centers in the House, which was drafted by Senator Jim Guthrie. Now, this is a bill that provides counseling services for physically and sexually abused children. And I'm not going to debate that those things aren't important. They are. But I am going to debate the method by which they were created, because it is stupidity. See, Kelley Packer, Jim Guthrie, they think the best thing to do is to take our money to create new agencies which swallow up more of our money so that we can provide counseling for our kids. Well, I think the best thing to do is to work with the private sector. We already have counselors out there. We already have lots of people that are qualified to help and will probably, almost certainly, provide better services than can be offered through the state. So if we use those people, now the state isn't having to find buildings and lease these buildings. The state will then not have all the maintenance costs associated with these buildings. What we can do is simply refer those people in need to competent professionals. And in the case when the families can't afford this assistance and the assistance is still necessary, we can provide them vouchers that will pay a portion of, or when necessary, pay all of the bills for these services. But the key thing is that we should do it in a way that empowers the private sector. We should do it in a way that reduces our out-of-pocket costs. Now, my friends, I don't know what I can say more to you. These are the facts. And I have provided you the information that you can easily verify for yourself. Kelley Packer is counting on a win in this upcoming election, and she's counting on votes from two sources. First, she's counting on the vote from those supporters that don't care about the Constitution any more than she does. And second, she's hoping that you will remain ignorant. Because ignorant can be led anywhere. But with knowledge there is power. Now I ask you, exercise that power. One final thing. This is important information and it needs to get out. This video needs to go viral. I am asking you to send it to your friends. Post it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Make sure that the word gets out to the people. I'm Lance Earl. I'll see you soon.